Hello there. Welcome into a Friday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the Extra Sports 1300 app to do your listening. And that free to download, free to use app is sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health, and well-being for all. A veritable cornucopia of sports topics await you, and I'd love to get your thoughts. You can text into the show 719-247-1313, or you can send me a tweet on X. I am at Gingerly Tweets. Second and third round of the NFL draft tonight. We'll do about an hour of that. We'll see if the Broncos get on the board before we sign off today. Plenty to talk about in the meantime. And actually, let's start with the Broncos, shall we? And I've said that because of the work that the Broncos have done the last couple of years in building their roster, fortifying most of the positions on their team, it created a situation where they didn't have any glaring holes. Certainly, they didn't have the one glaring hole that so many NFL teams seem to have on a yearly basis, and that's quarterback. So they deserve to indulge themselves a bit. To simply go for the best player available and figure the rest out later. And I don't know that I didn't, expect the Broncos to indulge themselves in the way that they did by taking Jahdae Barron, the corner out of Texas. And I think most of all, Sean Payton and George Paton didn't think that they were going to be able to indulge themselves in that way. That's something that they talked about, that they didn't really believe that Jahdae Barron was going to be available at pick 20. And the sentiment from the Broncos is usually it's we got our guy. That was always the Elway era. We got our guy. This wasn't their guy. They can't spin it that way. This is not their guy. They're happy to have him. And I would say that Barron is more of a guy they felt like they couldn't pass up on. You know, everyone wonders each year how the Ravens and the Eagles keep seeming to hit home runs with the picks that they make. They always seem, despite drafting at the end of the first round, land a player that you're going, man, he's going to be great. And it's because they have been able to have the same mentality every single year. We don't have any big needs to address. We went from Flacco, and then immediately after Flacco, we landed Lamar. We add some in free agency. We're just going to take a really good football player, and we're going to find a way to fit him in. That's why the Eagles and the Ravens always ace the draft. They don't have to reach. They don't have to draft purely out of need. And the Broncos are now in this situation where they can do the same thing. They don't have to reach. They don't have to pay the quarterback tax or anything like that. They could just take a really good football player. And as surprising as drafting Barron is, I think you can kind of talk yourself into this is actually a want for the Denver Broncos. Let's characterize it that way, a want, not necessarily a need, because none of us were talking about the Broncos taking a corner. So it actually makes more sense the more you think about it. We saw late in the season when the Broncos kind of fell off a little bit, still were able to make the playoffs, but they lost some games in there that they needed to win. And a big thread between those games was teams having success throwing it away from Pat Surtain. Something that will only happen more often now that Pat Surtain is the reigning defensive player of the year. And you think specifically to the Browns and Bengals games. Who is covering Jerry Jeudy? Who's covering T. Higgins? Not Pat Surtain. and the Broncos got killed. Now, if a team is going to go in and saying, we're going to avoid number 2, we're not throwing in his direction, Denver has someone in Barron that can make that strategy not so foolproof. Now you have somebody potentially on the other side that can defend a little bit. Certainly not, we're not going to put the expectation on Jahdae Barron that he's going to be the next Pat Surtain. But he has the chance to be a very good NFL corner, and it can keep teams a bit more honest. Now, I don't know that this needs to necessarily be taken as a referendum on Riley Moss. Doesn't have to be that. Slot corner, very important position in the NFL. Broncos had one of the arguably the best of all time in Chris Harris at that position. Barron can play there, and you could keep Moss and Surtain on the outside. So it doesn't have to be, because Barron's coming in, and that's kind of the main point of all of this. Broncos didn't need Jahdae Barron. But he's an upgrade over Riley Moss, right? We can at least say that without, destroying Riley Moss. And we have to be a little bit honest about Riley Moss. He was the one being attacked in that Bengals game. Barron is an upgrade over Riley Moss. Or he could be an upgrade over a player that I really liked as well that we don't talk about as much, Jaquan McMillan. I liked Jaquan McMillan last year for the Broncos. Barron's better. So you don't have to take this as, Riley Moss isn't very good or Jaquan McMillan. No, they're solid. It's good. But Barron's better. And I would actually expect Barron to be more in the slot for the Denver Broncos with Riley Moss and Pat Surtain on the outside. That's what should excite you if you're a Broncos fan, is the fact that the Broncos have the ability to put him anywhere in that secondary. And that was something George Paton talked about a lot last night. He's a corner, but he could do a lot of different things. And what this pick says more than anything else is that the Broncos, because they have Bo Nix, they don't have to reach. They don't have to pay a tax on a certain position. They can't go, we really like this player, but we really need this. They can let the draft board fall to them. And it's what I've talked about with the running backs. Why are the Broncos thinking about moving up to take Ashton Genty when they could potentially have an Amarion Hampton, or the way that the draft board has fallen? Look today. Travion Henderson available at the end of day one. They can let the draft board fall to them, and it did. It fell to them in a really interesting and fun way. This is a good thing because this means the Broncos are a good franchise again. These are the kind of picks that good franchises, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Kansas City, is the kind that they make. Now, I will say that there are probably some other things that factored in. I think Emeka Egbuka going to Tampa right before had an impact on where they would go. I think the way the draft board fell as it was leading up to the Broncos pick, I thought Egbuka was very much in play for them at 20. And in Tampa, that's an even weirder pick, not to, veer off track too much. But why is Tampa taking Emeka Egbuka? Chris Godwin was arguably the best receiver in the free agent market, and they get him, they keep him. And then you draft another wide receiver when, to me, you have glaring needs defensively. That's a team that can indulge themselves. Tampa Bay, to me, has more glaring needs than the Denver Broncos. But I think that the Broncos would have seriously thought about taking Ibuka at 20 had he had been there. The only, I think, other place that I think that the Broncos should have looked at as that first round was unfolding. Sean Payton says they weren't thinking about moving up. I don't know. Take what he says with a grain of salt sometimes. But I don't know why you don't seriously entertain going up and grabbing Tyler Warren. I mean, he that was the exact scenario that I had talked about a couple of days ago, where if a team goes Genty too early, which happened, or if some trade happens that kind of shakes up things a little bit, which happened, an elite player in this draft, in a draft that doesn't have a ton of elite players, could have fallen out of the top 10, and that's when the Broncos could realistically strike. And that exactly happened with Tyler Warren. They took Colston Loveland, which I think was the wrong choice. But the comps between Loveland and Sam Laporta, with Ben Johnson being now the head coach, that was there. I think more than anything, it was a matter of taste when it comes to the tight ends. But then that left Tyler Warren exposed, and he was never going to get past Indy. So I thought there was an opportunity there, window, for the Broncos to move up and get Tyler Warren, even with Evan Ingram on the roster. But again, it kind of goes back to my original point. Did they have to go tight end? No, because they signed Evan Ingram. I think Tyler Warren would not have been surplus to requirements. I think if you have an elite player fall within your reach, you go up and get him. So as much as I liked the Barron pick for the Denver Broncos, I suppose the dream scenario, the way the draft fell, was for them to go up and get Tyler Warren. But what would that have cost you? And what would that leave you with today? Because as we set up the storyline for today, it's got to be a running back, right? That's the one thing that you would characterize as a need, but but it aligned perfectly with this draft that there were so many quality running backs. So I think the Broncos played it the right way. Even if Travion Henderson goes late in that first round, I think that the Broncos are left with a few guys today that could be impactful. So that I suppose that's the luck of it all, that the Denver Broncos, who, if you did say they had a need, it would be at running back, and it just so happens to come in a draft where there are a plethora of impact running backs available. But I think that's where tonight they have to come away with the running back. Let's not forget the Breece Hall of it all. Could there be some movement there with the Jets? But I think if the Broncos don't come away with the running back with either of their two picks, I think then I will call into question a little bit what their strategy was for day two. But I think night one, didn't see it coming. I don't think a lot of people did. Surprising, but the more you talk about it, the more you mull it over, it's like, hey, Broncos could use somebody like Jahdae Barron. Take your thoughts on the newest Denver Bronco at 719-247-1313. Obviously, much more last night from the draft. Yes, a certain someone did not go in the first round. We'll talk about that and look more forward to what is on the board for the Denver Broncos as they sit currently at 51, but that could change. Drive Time Sports live on a Friday. Coming up next, it's a good thing that the Nuggets did their part to make you not have to choose between whether watching the NFL draft or watching their game 3 against the Clippers. We'll talk about that next. Welcome back, Drive Time Sports on this Friday, round 2 of the NFL draft coming up at 5. Broncos got to wait a while unless they decide to get froggy and jump up the draft board. We'll get into that coming up in a little bit. Let's talk about the other sporting event last night, although maybe a bloodbath, a beatdown would be a more accurate description of it. You know, I was thinking this last night. For a team that's not that far removed from winning an NBA title, the Denver Nuggets have had far too many embarrassing losses the last couple of years. Wouldn't you agree? Both in the regular season and the playoffs. Like, I know the second apron and all that kind of stuff, but I mean, games like last night, it just underscores in a fairly drastic way, but it underscores just how far the Nuggets have come down in just a couple of years. You know what last night reminded me of? Game 2 of the Wolves series last year. If you remember, game 1, Minnesota came out super physical, and the Nuggets seemed to have a lot of problems with it. But they were able, I mean, they lost the game, but it wasn't a blowout or anything like that. But you could tell the cracks forming, right? The warning signs of, oh, they really got to change some stuff up or they're in for a bad go of it. And then sure enough, game 2 happens. They got blown out. That was the heat pack toss from Jamal Murray. And I look at, it was just one game later, but I look at this series through 3 games and it's similar. So the warning signs were there, the cracks were there. You saw what the Clippers had that could give the Denver Nuggets a lot of problems. But through the grace of Nikola Jokic, or certainly in game 1, the Clippers turnovers, they were able to kind of make it through relatively okay. They split the first 2 games, were even in the game that they lost, they had a chance to win. And then last night, the dam just breaks. You get blown out 117-83 in a game that you really had to have. They really needed to win that game last night. I know there's going to be some positive spin of, oh, as long as they split with the Clippers, you don't want to be chasing this series. At some point, you got to put your foot down and take control of it, like they did in game 1, right? So they really couldn't afford to lose that game, in my opinion. And they weren't even competitive. And what was the problem? The same thing that's been the problem all year long. I can sum it up in one stat for you. Clippers in the first half hit 12 of their 22 three-pointers. Nuggets hit 5 of 18. And in the postgame show last night on Altitude, it was Hanslick, Dempsey, and Lombardi, and they're discussing, you know, is it the offense? Is it the defense? You know, that chicken or the egg debate. And we've had it before. The Nuggets are built to make twos. They are, right? Their best player is a center. Their second best player is a mid-range jump shooter. Their third best player is a dunker. They have one player, one, on this roster whose identity is mostly based on three-point shooting, and that's Michael Porter. That's it. Nobody else on this roster, when you think of their traits, you would throw three-point shooter in there. Nikola Jokic, because he's Nikola Jokic, has essentially turned himself into the best three-point shooter the Nuggets have. But that's far down on the list of things that you mentioned when you talk about Nikola Jokic. And Michael Porter last night, 1 of 4, and he had a bum shoulder. But if you're built that way, and if your offense works best that way, you have to be able to not give up three-pointers. You can't make that math work if you're trading twos for threes. It's, to me, I get both are an issue. To me, first has always been the defense. Always. If you want to build yourself as somewhat of an antidote, counter programming to what the NBA has become, you have to be able to stop what other teams are looking to do. And more NBA teams want to shoot threes. And they can't do it. They can't stop them. And this is why, to take the bigger picture into it moving forward, this is why it's so important to get fresh eyes on this operation. Now, I don't think you could put a lot on David Adelman. I saw a headline from Mark Kislev of the Gazette that David Adelman proved he's not the right guy. I don't know if I want to heap a ton of blame on David Adelman because he can't fix the issues that were plaguing Michael Malone, right? Michael Malone wasn't getting this team to play better defense. So I don't really put too much of what's going on David Adelman. But I've said he's not going to get this job unless they at least win this series and give OKC a run for their money. Right? And it's not about him. I think it's about needing not only fresh sets of eyes on this team, but they need alignment. Let's not forget what all of this firing Calvin Booth and Michael Malone stuff was about. The fact that they couldn't agree. They couldn't see eye to eye. And it seemed at times that one was sabotaging the other and vice versa. So this isn't about what David Adelman is or is not. Do you really want to start the next chapter of the Nuggets franchise with a new general manager that's saddled with a coach he didn't pick? Because that's going to immediately start things off going in the wrong direction. And it makes it more likely that this kind of, disruption or antagonistic relationship between the front office and the coach happens again. Not saying that Adelman is quite as headstrong as Michael Malone, but if you're bringing in a new general manager and David Adelman's not his guy, then you leave yourself vulnerable to those kind of things happening again. So they got to get fresh eyes on it, and they probably need to get fresh eyes in the general manager position, but also the head coaching position. Now, there exists a way to actually fix both issues. No matter what side of the argument, defense or offense, you're on, there's actually a way to fix both. There's a thing in the NBA. It's called a 3-and-D guy. What that means is a player that shoots three-pointers efficiently and plays good defense. Now, I'm speaking this way because the Nuggets don't have any of those players on their roster, which to me seems like a problem. But if you recall, and you're really going to have to think back, they had a player like this. His name was Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. He was a 3-and-D guy. They had one on the roster. And Calvin Booth and Josh Kroenke felt like he was surplus to requirements. Actually, what it was, if we're being honest about it, was that Josh Kroenke was not okay with the team going into the second apron to sign him. And then Calvin Booth had to spin it, doing his best Brad Pitt from Moneyball impression. We can't replace Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, but through Christian Brown, we can approximate him. But that's the problem. Brad Pitt was talking about the entire Oakland A's lineup making up for Giambi. The Nuggets were expecting Christian Brown to just approximate Kentavious Caldwell-Pope himself. And Christian Brown has not been able to guard James Harden or Kawhi. Why haven't we discussed Christian Brown guarding one of those two guys? Why is that? Why is that not an option? I haven't heard anybody talk about it. Why? Because he's not one of those players. And the best thing that he does offensively is cut to the rim. That's the best thing he does. He's not a 3-and-D guy. I would argue that the main issue is not that they replaced Kentavious Caldwell-Pope or Bruce Brown with worse players necessarily. You could make that argument, but that's not the direction I want to go in. It's more that they replace them with players in Christian Brown and now Russell Westbrook who play in a different way. They almost leaned into the idea that we're going to just have a bunch of cutters going to the basket around Nikola Jokic rather than guys that can spot up and consistently make three-pointers. So they leaned into the type of offense that they were. So there goes your three-point shooting. And I think you could argue that defensively they're worse in the aggregate. But it's becoming abundantly clear now. It wasn't the fact that the starters hadn't played together and just needed to be healthy, although health would be a welcome thing this time of year. I just think that they're built wrong for the direction that the NBA is going, and they have to decide moving forward how, if they're going to continue to be this outlier, right, in a three-point shooting league, and they don't want to play that way. They don't want to trade threes for threes. Okay, but you got to trade twos for stops. Or the new GM and the new head coach that will come in will say, hey, who are we? We got Nikola Jokic. That's great. He can certainly pass it to open guys on the perimeter. We need to get more guys. I'm not talking about, you replace Brown and Porter and Murray and Gordon all with 3-and-D guys. I don't think that's feasible. But there's got to be a better mix than you have on this team right now. And you need those changes to be made. And I keep going back to this, but you need these changes to be made by people who have no loyalty to anyone or anything other than winning basketball games. Because I think that it's down the list, but that's on the list of what has gone wrong with the Denver Nuggets. That they have had loyalty that is admirable, but loyalty that now is kind of flying in the face of what should be the ultimate collective goal, and that's winning. So just like game 2 in the Wolves series, it's an exaggerated example of what's gone wrong with the Nuggets. But, I think in some ways, in order for the Nuggets to get fixed, they have to have a game like this. Right? Game 2, even though they lost, may not shock Josh Kroenke into saying, okay, this direction that I signed off on isn't the right way to go, because then it's turnovers and it's missed free throws and it's all this kind of stuff. No, the foundation of this team is faulty. And you need games like last night to lay it all out there and for no one to be able to make any excuses or be able to, spin it. There's no way to spin last night. The Nuggets aren't a good three-point shooting team, aren't a good defensive team, and the Clippers just took full advantage of both. And that game wasn't even competitive. 719-24-7-13-13. Take your thoughts on game 3. Are we calling time of death on this thing? Is this series over? Take your thoughts on that. More Drive Time Sports after this on Extra Sports 1300. Welcome back, Drive Time Sports. Round one of the NFL draft came to an end last night. Got the early trade with Travis Hunter going to Jacksonville. And I think things got a little bit wild towards the end of the first round. So I guess I thought that it was either going to be super chalk or crazy, and I guess we got a little bit of both. We got enough last night, I suppose. And going into day two, obviously the big story is Shedeur. And the way I look at last night, it can't just be at this point about Shedeur, the quarterback prospect. It just can't. I refuse to believe that it is just simply because he's not as good of a prospect as I and many people. Mel Kiper was going to bat for Shedeur Sanders over and over again. I just can't accept that this is just on Shedeur, an indictment of him, the quarterback, because I don't think it is. I don't think it's because of who he is as a quarterback. Now, you have to look at both sides of the equation, right? Look at some of the teams that you may have expected to take him and what they did. Browns, I'll actually leave them alone because I don't know if I like them trading for giving up Travis Hunter. Don't know if I like it yet. I think that we're going to have to judge that to see what the Browns do with their first round pick next year, but they certainly got a haul. But Browns are sitting there right there to start today and could take him. So I'll leave the Browns out of it for now. Raiders take Genty, even with Jacksonville moving up, because apparently Pete Carroll's grand plan is to simply hang on to the football for a full 60 minutes and never let the superior quarterbacks in the AFC West ever touch the ball. That's apparently their goal here. Saints, I actually don't blame them. They take arguably the best offensive lineman in Kelvin Banks. I still like Will Campbell, more. But Kelvin Banks, really good. Ramczyk just retired. And if you were a Bronco fan, you watched that game against the Saints. I don't think Spencer Rattler's any good, nor is Jake Haener. But I don't know that you got the full picture because those two guys were just under duress all night. So I still think that if you're the Raiders, the Saints, I do think you're still all these teams are in a position that, you know what, you got to pay the quarterback tax. Sorry, you haven't found a quarterback. That's the way it works. That's the way I believe. But Saints, I don't dislike the pick. I'll put it this way. I like the Saints pick more than I like the Raiders pick. Steelers have long felt that in order to reach their perennial goal of going 9-8, they don't need a quarterback. And history will tell you they don't need a quarterback to go 9-8. And then the Giants are, after all, the Giants. So there's two sides here to make all this happen. And you do have to consider some of the teams in their track record and everything with Shedeur falling. But the fact that Shedeur is now out of the first round, which I thought, I'll just be honest, and I got this completely wrong because I thought there's no way he's going to be available today. But the fact that he is available today has to be more than just him being as a quarterback. And I know we can get biased, and I suppose I got to raise my hand a little bit here. At times, we can be biased towards what we see the most, right? Here's a perfect example of it. And I'm not comparing these two as players. I'm just saying this is another example of being biased to what you see. You see Nikola Jokic every game, and you can't possibly imagine anybody else winning the MVP. Well, there have been people that at least deserve consideration. But we can do that. We can be biased to what we see. But and maybe that's factoring into it a little bit with my evaluation of Shedeur Sanders. I watched every game of him at Colorado. But I don't think my eyes were playing tricks on me. Maybe I like him a little bit more than some other quarterbacks because I know him, the familiarity, all that kind of stuff. But I saw a guy, a quarterback, who was lifting up a pretty below average roster, if we're going to be polite about it. Right? He had Travis. He had some solid weapons. The offensive line was terrible year one. Year two, it was better, not night and day. Didn't really have too much of a running game the entire time he was in Boulder. And he was still able to elevate that team. I thought I saw a quarterback that was accurate. I saw a quarterback that was poised, even under heavy pressure, that put up numbers that puts him along with some of the best quarterbacks in the country. And I heard a guy, and this is a lot of people are theorizing that anonymous statement from an assistant coach in the NFL was what did it. Every time I heard Shedeur Sanders talk, yes, there was some confidence, there was some arrogance. Certainly, right? That's part of it. But I heard a guy that never threw his teammates under the bus. I saw a guy that took accountability. I saw a guy that pointed the thumb way more than he pointed the finger. So if he's he could be the most duplicitous person in this draft process. Because what that anonymous quote from an assistant coach says is that Shedeur Sanders behind closed doors is a completely different person than who he is publicly. And I don't know that I can wholeheartedly believe that. What I think is in the mix here and what part of this is about is not Shedeur, it's Deion. Head coaches, by nature, bit of a paranoid bunch, and they have a lot to deal with. Right? There's a lot that goes into being an NFL head coach. So when Deion Sanders talks at the beginning of this process about him making sure that Shedeur goes to a good place, and when any bad loss or losing streak will inevitably make Deion Sanders replacing the head coach of that franchise the biggest story, I think that's got to be part of this. And I don't think head coaches welcome that. They're going to be second guessed. They're going to be, people are going to try to run them out of town as it is. But throwing Deion Sanders into the mix, I think that would be more of the issue to me than any shortcoming in Shedeur Sanders' character. And some of the Deion stuff is not even Deion's fault. Right? As far as the NFL goes, the only scenario which he is given any air to is coaching both Shiloh and Shedeur. Right? That's the only one that he's ever said, maybe. He's far more often said that he doesn't want to follow his son to the NFL. But that's not going to stop the rumors. That's not going to stop people from talking about it. So that part of it, I think, is somewhat out of his hands. But a lot of this is him. He did say at the start of this process that he would make Shador go to a place that's good for him. He mentioned he didn't want Shador to play in the cold, essentially threatening to pull an Archie Manning, and only seemed to back off when popular opinion was Cam Ward was definitely going to be taken number one. You know, there's a historical comp, I think, to what I'm talking about here. It's LeVar Ball. It's LeVar Ball. He, the father of Lonzo and LaMelo and LiAngelo, was deemed as a bigger liability than anything from his sons. And his effusive praise of his sons turned them into what many considered were overrated prospects. Lonzo has had injury issues, but he's a good player. LaMelo Ball, I have some issues with his game, but he's talented. But it was LeVar Ball constantly talking that people took that out on his sons. And maybe, and it's getting to the point, and you saw it on social media last night, the glee that people had with Shador falling. Like, I've never seen anything like that. And it's social media, it's whatever. I'm not going to be the social media police. But is this really about Shador, or is this about Deion? Because I think Deion Sanders has had a similar impact on Shador as LeVar Ball had on his sons. And it's born out of love. It's born out of belief. Like it could be coming from the best place. But when Deion Sanders retires his son's jersey a week before the draft, when he, constantly says that Shador is persecuted because he's his son, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And people are like, you know what? Yeah, we will hate on him. Thank you. You think that we're hating on him when we're not, we're going to start hating on him. Deion has not done Shador a lot of favors. And I think that teams, in addition to taking all of Shador's skills or shortcomings into account, and his personality, are also taking into account his father. And how many draft prospects do we ever have a conversation about their parents? I think there are teams, I'm not saying all of them, but I think there are teams that are saying, I don't know if taking Shador at this moment is worth having Deion or the aura of Deion Sanders hanging over our team. Think about it. NFL teams did not want Colin Kaepernick because he was a distraction more than anything else. They didn't want Tim Tebow because of the distraction. They don't like distractions. But look, we have to keep this in mind. Shador could end up on any one of these teams that passed on him last night. Cleveland is first up today. Vegas, New Orleans. I actually like the Rams as a sneaky Shador landing spot to replace Stafford. He still has every chance to be the quarterback I think he could be in the NFL. And you can argue that some of those teams actually made themselves better, not in the way that they need to make themselves better, but now Shador could be stepping into a situation that's a little bit better given what those teams did last night, especially a team like New Orleans. I think last night was a bit of a message. I think it was a bit of a blow to the ego, but I don't think it's of Shador. I think this is to Deion. And saying, I know you love your son and you believe him, and we, as fathers, you can understand But when you have a platform like he does, and you are so effusive with your praise, and you protect him against anybody that would dare criticize him, and you make it out to be like this persecution complex, and you do things like, what he did last week in Boulder, like, it doesn't help. It doesn't help. Okay. Is it the worst thing to ever happen in mankind? No, but it does not help at a time where every little thing about Shador is being scrutinized. So if we're ranking the reasons here, I think last night and what happened is more about Shador's father than it is him. Take your thoughts on that. 719 247 1313. Coming up next, day 2 of the draft begins in just about an hour. Where will the Broncos look now after drafting Jahdae Barron last night? Welcome in Drive Time Sport. Draft day 2 coming up in less than 1 hour. Ryan Kaufman with you and appreciate you tuning in. A reminder, you can watch the show on a daily basis on our social media platforms at Extra Sports 1300. The number, if you would like to be a part of the show, is 719 247 1313. Or, of course, you can always also reach out on social media at Gingerly Tweets on X, probably best to get in touch with me. Broncos surprising last night with the selection of Jahdae Barron. And Sean Payton made a joke last night that he called him JB just to make sure, because he didn't have a full grasp on how to, but it's Jahdae Barron. And actually, I think we have a little vignette thing here from our friends at Westwood One that can tell you a little bit more about the newest Denver Bronco. So that's the lowdown on Jahdae Barron from the 719. Very surprised by the pick after watching his highlight reel. I think it's almost balanced out the corners. He looks a lot like PS2, and he's definitely faster than Moss. I would certainly hesitate to put Surtain. Surtain has reached a level now where if you're going to compare, and I know that's not your point here to say, oh, they got another Pat Surtain. But you're right. I mean, that's what this does now. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of when the Broncos took Bradley Chubb, right? And I know that Bradley Chubb ultimately didn't work out and he was drafted in a higher position and the Broncos were at there is a different time. But I think the thought process is similar. Right? You have the arguably the best at what he does on one side of the defense. Well, everything's just going to move the other way. They're going to double team Von Miller. They're going to roll away from him. Now it gives you an opportunity to attack a team exactly the way you put it, balance it out. There's still one side that you don't want to throw to. It's still Surtain's side. This is not saying, oh, we're afraid of Jahdae Barron, so we're going to throw it at Surtain. The idea is just it won't maybe work as well. Because again, I go back to the Browns game when Jerry Jeudy lit them up and the Bengals game. Barron is an upgrade over both Moss and McMillan. And I think he's going to play the slot more. But it gives you that. And the fact that the Broncos could take that without consternation. Look, I saw, and obviously this is near and dear to my heart because I was one of these people. This is not like when they drafted Pat Surtain. Okay, because you still had a glaring need at quarterback. The reason why you can take a Jahdae Barron is because you have your quarterback. I think this is a good pick. I do. I think that makes the Broncos a better team. And if we're really being honest about it, we expect Bo Nix to take a step forward this year. But what really ended up hurting the Denver Broncos towards the end of the season? Was it their offense or their defense? I would argue it was more their defense getting a little bit exposed. So, as Sean Payton says, there are the musts, there are the wants, there are the needs. I don't know. The drafting Barron lies somewhere between the want and the need. It's not a must, but it's the type of pick that you can make when you're in the position that the Broncos are in. I like the pick, but now you got to really think about running back. Travion Henderson's on the board. Quinshon Judkins is still on the board. Both Ohio State running backs. I would expect the Browns, with one of their two picks early on, to be targeting one of those two. So if you like the Ohio State backs, the Broncos are probably going to have to move up. But don't forget there's Caleb Johnson, who I think I probably wouldn't put him above Judkins or Travion Henderson, but I think he's in that tier. After those guys, and some people think that DJ Giddens is actually on that level too. I think that there's a little bit of a separation before you get to Giddens, Scattaboo, and Devin Neal. But I think all three of those players perhaps wouldn't be able to have quite the impact of Henderson, Judkins, or Caleb Johnson. But I do think they can make an impact with what they do well. If you're still looking for the ideal fit for what Sean Payton wants to do, it's Travion Henderson at this point with Omarion Hampton off the board. But Judkins, Caleb Johnson, I think they would both immediately become the best running back on the Denver Broncos. And I think that the next tier, Giddens, Scattaboo, Devin Neal, I think they have a chance to fit in somewhere. I don't think they outright, you could say that they become the best running back that the Broncos have. But remember, Sean Payton does like to use multiple running backs. So if he gets one of these guys, it's upgrading the room in its entirety. But I think that's where at some point the Broncos got to think about it. Now, there are some other players that I think if you look at the board for day 2, that become very interesting. Luther Burden III out of Missouri, still available and may be available right around where the Broncos pick. And this is a guy you have, Marvin Mims is kind of his own thing, right? The way they use him. Cortland Sutton, with his size, the catch radius, the ability to go up and get the ball, what he is in the red zone, gives you a few different dynamics. Luther Burden is a guy that Bo Nix can throw to close to the line of scrimmage. He'll break a tackle and turn it into a huge play. So I think Luther Burden is really interesting. I don't know if the Broncos, if I'm stacking the Broncos draft board, I think what I would say is if Henderson, Judkins, and I'll say Caleb Johnson are gone, and they might go early. Who knows? I think one of them will. I probably would pick Burden before that next group of running backs. We'll see how this thing plays out early on. We'll know some of the picks, obviously, coming up here in about an hour. And you look at some of the teams on the board. Browns, I think, will definitely be in the mix for a running back. They draft twice, so they could potentially get a running back and Shador within the first 4 picks. Who else? Raiders, no. Don't forget the Patriots, right? Patriots could look running back. Ben Johnson there with a couple of picks. Of course, he had a 2 running back system. So, yeah, I think there will be a running back available when the Broncos pick if they stay, but it sure looks like, and I'm looking Dallas as well. Broncos may have to make a move if they're going to go get a Travion Henderson. I'll make him the main target of the Broncos. I think best case scenario as day 2 begins is the Broncos still landing Travion Henderson. They're going to have to move up to get him. And they're going to have to move up significantly to go get him. And then I keep mentioning Breece Hall. Don't forget Breece Hall. Situation with the Jets. Is he on the way out? Could the Broncos use, say, maybe their 3rd round pick, maybe a 2nd round pick next year or something to get Breece Hall, stay in the 2nd round, and then you're talking a Luther Burden, perhaps. But I think there are plenty of players that you look at it and say he would look good in a Broncos uniform. It's just how many of them go quickly to the point where the Broncos really can't make a jump up to grab one of them. But I think it's Travion Henderson 1. It's Judkins, Caleb Johnson, and Luther Burden are right there. Probably Johnson just because of the need. Then Burden, and then you get into the next group of running backs, which is Scatterboo, Neal, and Scatterboo and Neal might be available tomorrow or late tonight. So I think there are certainly some options. Take your thoughts at 709-24-7-1313. Tom says Broncos got to go up and get Henderson. Should have taken Hampton. Running back room is atrocious and the DB room is not. They don't have a running back on the roster that can help this team move forward. Well, I think, look, your thing about Amarion Hampton, I think is valid. You can make an argument that getting Amarion Hampton would have been a good pick. He ends up going to the Chargers, which is interesting because now you have Hampton and Genty in the AFC West. They need to get a running back. Travion Henderson would be ideal, but they still have Jaleel McLaughlin. There are some other Audric Estime, I'm not a huge believer in. Sean Payton might be. They have to address it. Was it a big swing and a miss last night because they didn't take a running back? No. No, I like them getting Jahdae Barron, but I agree that they have to today get a running back. 719-24-7-1313. Take more of your draft thoughts. We'll take a broader view. Of course, one of the big moves last night was the Jacksonville Jaguars taking Travis Hunter, which you love until you hear perhaps what Jacksonville's idea for him is. That's next here on Extra Sports 1300. Welcome back, Drive Time Sports. Coming up on the beginning of round 2 of the NFL draft. Let's talk a little bit more about what happened last night. This coming in from the 719. I think the Raiders are smart or very lucky. They picked Genty early and can pick Sanders at 37, essentially getting the number 1 QB and number 1 running back of the draft. I'll just say I don't like them taking Genty that early. So if they do end up with Shador today, then I'm going to go with the latter on that they got a little bit lucky. And Andrew Brandt was a longtime front office executive, now is in the media, does a great job of kind of breaking down what goes on in a front office. The addition of Genty at that pick actually does not make good fiscal sense for a team that, even if you like Genty, is going to need more, right? You like Genty, you like Bowers, you like Crosby. I don't know what else you like on the Raiders outside that. So, and that's the thing with Geno is I don't think Geno Smith is a bad quarterback, but he's one of those guys that you're going to have to surround him with a lot. And Genty could be that, but I just think you use the depth at the running back position. Why don't the Raiders trade back a few spots? Because who's going to take Genty if the Raiders didn't? Jaguars moved up for Hunter. Browns took Graham. Were we talking Cowboys at 12? Do exactly what the Browns did. Trade back a couple of picks for somebody that really likes somebody. And then take Genty at a more decent number, get more draft capital. But those are the type of discussions that happen right now, right? I mean, if Genty is everything the Raiders hope and dream he will be, they won't care where they took him. It's like Bo Nix last year. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't bite teams sometimes for reaching for a guy or taking a guy earlier than they should. Look, if Cleveland, I'll say this about Cleveland, I'll say it about the Saints, I'll say it about the Raiders. If they come back today and get Shador, then they've had a good couple of days. Because I'm not out on Genty by any stretch of the imagination. I say he's the best running back in this class. I just think that there are other really good running backs that you could get a little bit more value here. So we'll see what the Raiders do. The order for today, Browns will pick first. That could be a quarterback. And then the Browns pick again before the Raiders do. So the Browns are going to have 2 shots at Shador before the Raiders can, if they stay there. And then we'll see. And then the Saints are a couple spots back of the Raiders. And what was the other team I was looking at? Oh, the Rams as an heir apparent. And don't Miami for Shador? Probably not, but not out of the realm of possibility. But the Rams, looking for a heir apparent to Stafford, are picking 46 overall, 14th today. So we'll see. I mean, again, Saints, Browns, Raiders, if any one of them end up with Shador, you'll kind of wonder if he hits why they didn't trade back into the first round and get that 5th year. But those are tomorrow problems. At least you have the guy. The Browns are interesting. That trade. Because I said this about if we're going with the Shohei Ohtani comparison, which Andrew Berry has made. You know, where the Angels were chastised in the end was, one, they didn't give him enough help to win any games, despite having this unicorn of a player. But it was also because, knowing that he was going to leave, they never got anything in return. They held out some weird belief that he was going to stay, and then they got nothing. So on one hand, you could argue, if Travis Hunter is the Shohei Ohtani of football, at least the Browns got something for him, and they got a lot of somethings. That's a flat out haul that they got back from the Jacksonville Jaguars. But as far as this year's draft is concerned, they get Mason Graham, and let's say they get a quarterback, Milroe or Shador, and they get Travion Henderson. That is exactly no additional players more than they would have had if they wouldn't have made the trade and just taken Travis Hunter, because he is two football players in one. So time is always good to judge these trades, but I gotta see what the Browns are doing, because listening to Andrew Berry last night, he put a lot into what's in next year's draft. And maybe that's an indication that they're not going quarterback today. But I got to see what they come up with next year with that Jags pick before I can totally get on board with the decision to trade down and lose out on an opportunity to take Travis Hunter. As far as Jacksonville is concerned, you get Travis Hunter, that's great, right? He could be a weapon for Trevor Lawrence. He can upgrade a pretty poor defense. By the way, not for nothing, shouldn't be your main motivation, but Travis Hunter is from the state of Florida. The Jacksonville Jaguars are perpetually hurting for fans, and he'll probably bring some. He is box office for a franchise that is perpetually in a state of not having a box office draw, even though they have Trevor Lawrence. That's how difficult it is for them to draw fans. And I think it's gotten a little bit better, but they're still taking every opportunity to go to London, and they don't get great crowds on Sundays. So I love the Jags getting Travis Hunter. I do. The Browns side of the trade, TBD. But they said last night that they were going to start him off as a receiver and ease him into being defensive back. And then you remember that this is the organization that decided that Urban Meyer was the best equipped coach to handle at the time, we thought, a generational quarterback prospect in Trevor Lawrence, or just thought Urban Meyer was capable of running an NFL franchise. You're reminded of that, even though some of the names have changed. The name at the very top of the organizational flowchart has not. This would be a mistake. Just because Travis Hunter can do both, and I'm glad that the Jags want him to do both. You do have to do this the right way, right? There is an order of operations that I think is more conducive to Travis Hunter realizing his potential. Because as great of a prospect as he is, he's still that. He's not a finished product. He has some growing to do. He has to adjust to the NFL level. Travis Hunter should be on day one a starting corner. And then you start off with a limited role, maybe some third downs, maybe some, gadget plays, things like that for a wide receiver, and let him ease into that aspect. If you want anything from Travis Hunter, one or the other, you want him to be a shutdown corner immediately. If there is more, I've said that Travis Hunter, the best of the two things that he does is play defensive back. He is a better defensive back than he is a wide receiver. He could be great at both. He could. I want him day one with most of his focus on being a defensive back. And I just think easing him in on the offensive side just makes so much more sense. So how the Jags handle him, like, it's great. You traded up, you got him. You're going to sell a lot of jerseys. You got a terrific player, all this kind of stuff. It's all good with Jacksonville right now. But there's going to be a lot of scrutiny on how they handle him, how they bring him along. And the first impressions I'm getting, I don't like what I hear. So we'll see if truly it is a new day in Jacksonville and things are being run the right way. But you got Travis Hunter, and that's massive. He's the best player in this draft, probably by a wide margin, and you landed him. And as their new GM, who I swear looks just like the general manager for the Jags in draft day, he comes from the Rams, and so F them picks was uttered last night. But I like what the Jags did. I really like what the Falcons did. Man, I thought that the Falcons were going to go pass rusher when they drafted Penix, and to make up for them drafting Penix just by having Kirk Cousins on the roster and ignoring pass rush, they tripled down on or doubled down on pass rush. Really like what the Falcons did, but that's natural, right? You get any team that drafts twice in a first round, unless they are the New York Giants, you like what they did. I don't like that the Giants. I don't mind Abdul Carter. Obviously, he's fantastic. But you come back into the first round to take Jackson Dart. That was a swing and a miss for me. But love what the Jags did. Love what Atlanta did. Who else stuck out last night to me? I mean, I think the Broncos, I don't think you could say they won the first round. I just really like that they got Barron. Who are some of my other favorite picks here? Don't get the Cowboys. I mean, offensive line are okay. I like Amarion Hampton to the Chargers, and I really like Matthew Golden to Green Bay. And then, of course, the teams at the back end of the first round. Malachi Starks goes to the Ravens, who I talked about at the beginning of the show. The Ravens are one of these teams that we look at after the draft and how did they end up with another stud player? Because they don't draft for need. They just draft a really awesome player and figure out the rest later. Malachi Starks going to the Ravens. Maxwell Hairston, the corner out of Kentucky, going to Buffalo. That is a great pick. I don't love the Chiefs allowing the Eagles to take Jihad Campbell, because that's what the Eagles need, right? Another stud to put on the front seven. But then the Chiefs come back right after and do exactly what they had to do after allowing the Eagles to take Jihad Campbell. They get an offensive lineman in Josh Simmons, and somebody who Joe DeLeon, draft analyst for Believe, who joined me a couple days ago, thinks that Simmons is the best tackle in this draft. He's just got some injury questions. So you go to the end of the first round. Falcons trade back and get James Pierce. Love that. Love Starks to the Ravens, and love what Buffalo, Philly, and Kansas City all did at the end of the first round. Steelers, I don't get. Giants, I don't get the second pick that they made. Raiders, too high on Genty. And Cowboys, in desperate need of skill position help take an offensive lineman. My brother, who's a big Cowboys fan, was pretty distraught over the whole thing. How do you think your team did? 719-247-1313. Coming up next, we'll take more of your thoughts on the draft. Nuggets loss in game 3 as we tick ever so much closer to the start of the second round. Broncos going to have to be moving on up if they're going to get Travion Henderson. That's next here on Extra Sports 1300. Game 4, Avalanche and Stars, taking place tomorrow night. That game will start at 7:30. Nuggets and Clippers before that at 3:30. Plan accordingly. And given some of the texts I have received, I don't know that the main attraction of the day will be the Nuggets and Clippers tomorrow from the 719. Just outmatched everywhere. Zero depth compared to the Clippers, who went out and got guys like Derek Jones Jr. You know, the Nuggets were supposed to have that depth, that flexibility to go out and get. Remember that? That was one of the things that Calvin Booth spun, is that they would have more flexibility if they didn't go into the second apron, and they used that flexibility to sign Dario Saric. Somebody remind me what Dario Saric did last night for the Nuggets or all season. And that's got to be part of it. You know, with these fresh set of eyes that are going to eventually take over, they got to look at and see that if they trade a Michael Porter or a Jamal Murray or an Aaron Gordon, it's they got to be able to get either something additional in the trade that helps them, or it's got to actually free up money for them to go get somebody. And it didn't seem like the flexibility that the Nuggets said they really had. Because here comes the trade deadline, nothing. When clearly this team needed help. Part of that is they didn't have anything to offer. Part of that was because they couldn't make any trades work financially. And that's going to be part of the job of the new general manager. It's got to extricate them from, this cap prison that they found themselves in. Some other thoughts, run through these. Miss Michael Malone last night. I don't know about that. Because he had a game just like that last year in game 2 against the Wolves. Booth ruined the Nuggets with the contract trades and signees. I think there's more validity to that. Cut Strawther, he's a bust. I just think him being the answer is a problem. Like, they developed one guy in Christian Brown. Okay? And Peyton Watson's okay, but diminishing returns from what they got from Christian Brown. And then if Strawther's the next guy in line, he's been banged up. He hasn't been the answer, certainly. Cut Westbrook. I'm with you on that. I think Westbrook, this will be his first and only year with the Denver Nuggets. Basically, you want to get rid of everybody. You want to bring back Malone and get rid of everybody else. And I could disagree with some of these, but I can't, fight the sentiment because last night was really bad. Someone like Coach Popovich is the kind of coach they need. How about Bob Myers as GM, Van Gundy to dictate some defense? I've thrown out Jeff Van Gundy. I threw him out immediately as a potential candidate for this job because I think you and I are thinking along the same lines. I still think you need to go more of a defensive-minded coach, but you need somebody that's done it before. The only thing how well him holding onto the ball when Jokic was trying to inbound it will hold it against him. If they go to Jokic and be like, we want to hire Jeff Van Gundy, no. Will he say no? I doubt it. Time heals all wounds. I like the idea of Van Gundy. And about Bob Myers as the GM, I'll tell you the dream scenario for the Denver Nuggets is getting Bob Myers and then getting Steve Kerr. Right? Bob Myers comes in, has the relationship with Kerr. Kerr's kind of in a situation at Golden State. If that ultimately doesn't work, could he go to the team and be like, you know what, this has run its course. You guys need a new voice, a different direction, and make that happen? I think it's a little bit of a pipe dream, I'll acknowledge, but that's the dream. And the great thing about what you're suggesting is you can get Bob Myers without getting Steve Kerr. Bob Myers, more than anybody else they can get, is uniquely qualified to take over this team. He built a dynasty. He made moves that eventually got the Warriors another title after Kevin Durant left. Bob Myers is the perfect candidate to take over. Two potential issues. One, does Bob Myers want to be the general manager of the Denver Nuggets? I would guess he would be. So I don't know how much of an impediment that is. He's going to want total say. These guys that leave, go into television, come back, they're only going to come back for the dream scenario. And getting Nikola Jokic is part of it, but being able to do whatever is necessary, which I think Josh Kroenke should let him do. But I do wonder if Josh is going to want to let go of the reins and turn it over to Bob Myers. But I'm with you on both points. Bob Myers, Jeff Van Gundy, let's do it. As Jokic will crest out if major changes don't happen. I don't think so. I don't. And that's the maybe the disappointing part of all this. I do think Nikola Jokic, it's not like him, but at some point you got to assert yourself over the organization that you have power. Like, he has power and he should help them. Like, he doesn't have to demand anything, but just help in the process here. Nikola Jokic knows what he needs. He needs to tell the organization he's not leaving. He won't. He'll sign the extension and he'll go back to Serbia, retire early, and go be with his horses before he demands a trade. I don't see it. But the Nuggets have absolutely taken advantage of the fact that he is the lowest maintenance superstar in the league. And I think he needs to start moving down the spectrum a little bit more. He doesn't need to be LeBron. He doesn't need to be Jimmy Butler or Kevin Durant, but a little bit more of that, I think, at this crucial juncture of the team's history, I think is warranted. From the 720, it's over. They gave up being the Nuggets. Clippers are clearly better. I don't know that I'm not going to say they gave up. It's over. Agreed. Clippers clearly better. Agreed. I don't think last night was about the Nuggets giving up. I just think they were being held together a little bit with duct tape and they fell apart. I think they fell apart last night. I don't think they gave up. But Game 4 all of a sudden becomes important from that aspect, what you're saying right there. Some people are saying you gave up. Show that you're not giving up. Fight back in Game 4. I don't think it ultimately changes this series. I think that the Clippers are going to win. I thought that going into it. But I think Game 4, more than anything else, you want to see the Nuggets fight, even if they are outmatched by the Los Angeles Clippers. Speaking of tomorrow, because here's the other storyline that's permeated throughout this series. Guess what? The Nuggets aren't healthy. David Adelman saying today that Russell Westbrook is questionable for tomorrow with, I think it's a foot injury. That could be viewed as good or bad. And then Michael Porter, again, optimistic that he will play. And if they're not going to hold him out out of an abundance of caution, David Adelman said if he can play, he's playing. And you need him. Like David Adelman's been talking about it. He needs Michael Porter's floor spacing. I don't know how much you're going to get it with this injury, but got to hope for it. You got what the Nuggets do have, you got to cling to for dear life if you're David Adelman. Seven 719-24-7, 13-13. Couple of your thoughts on the Broncos draft. Scattaboo. He's strong, very quick and fast, and he has a great name. He alone got ASU into the playoffs and drove defenses nuts. Boo and Bo. I like Cam Scattaboo, but at 51, might be a bit too high. But getting Cam Scattaboo in this draft, I think would be good. Not because of the name or because of vibes or aura. I think he can make an impact in that backfield. Brett says, I'm excited that the Denver Broncos drafted a new pass catcher for Patrick Mahomes. It's good. It's good. I like it. No fly zone redux. Is that what we're doing here with the Denver Broncos and Jahdae Barron? Get into my thoughts on him. And then finishing up with Tom here saying getting a quote-unquote a running back doesn't cut it. They need a difference maker. I think there are multiple difference makers. Travion Henderson is the biggest difference maker. Judkins is a difference maker. Caleb Johnson is a difference maker. And I'm with you. The Broncos got to try to get those guys. They got to try to. They need to try and get those guys. I agree. But there are running backs like Cam Scattaboo, like DJ Giddens, that can make an impact. And at the very least, the Broncos need to get a back that can make an impact in that room. And again, I will continue to say until that whole situation in New York is settled, do not forget about Breece Hall. Broncos could get a back today and then go out and trade for Breece Hall. And then the running back room would be immediately upgraded. But that's the thing about the draft. We all have grades after night one, but really you got to look at it as the whole draft. Broncos let the draft board fall to them in round one. Now they got to force the issue a little bit. These teams that are still in the quarterback business, Cleveland, Vegas, New Orleans, you may like what they did on night number one, but now you got to get what you really need. So I don't always love to do grades after one night. I have teams that I like what they did, teams that they didn't. I guess that's semantics. But I like to more look at the draft when it's all said and done because there are positions that are deeper that teams are waiting on. They're trying to get a player that they really like or a player at a position where there isn't as much depth. So I like to kind of let the whole thing play out and then say, all right, Team A did good, Team B did not. And I think with the Denver Broncos, getting a running back tonight is I can like what they did last night, but if they don't get a running back, then an impactful running back, then not going to like the draft as much for the Denver Broncos. 719-24-7, 1313. Take more of your thoughts. Coming up next, the three stories that are driving the show and round two of the NFL draft. We're going to be following along, see if the Broncos make a pick before we're done on this Friday here on Extra Sports 1300. Hello there. Welcome in Drive Time Sports on this Friday. Ryan Kaufman with you. Appreciate your patronage, whether you're listening to the show on air, online, or through the Extra Sports 1300 app, or whether you're watching this show on our social media platforms at Extra Sports 1300. Day 2 of the NFL draft begins now. We will get to that and what the Broncos may do and what other teams also may do. And maybe even another team, what they may do. That's what all this is for, right? But first, let's hit the 3 stories that are driving the show. All right, we start with what the Broncos did last night at pick number 20. I don't think anyone saw Jahdae Barron. I'll get it before training camp. Jahdae Barron, the cornerback out of Texas. Part of the reason why I can't pronounce his name is because we haven't been talking about him as a potential Denver Bronco throughout this process. And you know who also didn't expect Jahdae Barron to be a Denver Bronco? The Denver Broncos. I think what that draft pick last night tells you or shows you is that the Broncos have now found themselves in a very good situation that only so many NFL teams do. And that is, we got our quarterback and we have made meaningful acquisitions at all these other positions. And I've been talking about it. The Broncos can afford in the first round to treat themselves a little bit, to be a little indulgent. Maybe they're not drafting for need. They can just take the best player available. And Jahdae Barron was, in some people's minds, a top 10 prospect. I'd certainly have him in the top 20, probably top 15. And the pick not only shows the position that the Broncos are in, which is a good one, but you can also understand the practicality of a pick like this, right? Late in the season last year, despite having who would become the defensive player of the year, and despite having all these pass rushers, the Broncos in 2 games in particular, the 2 games against the teams from Ohio, got absolutely torched. They lost the Bengals game, should have lost the Browns game. Why? Because Jerry Jeudy and T. Higgins ate them alive. So there's a practical football reason for getting this guy. Because teams are only going to be more emboldened to throw away from Pat Surtain after he won Defensive Player of the Year. So what do? Put someone on the other side or put someone else in the secondary that can defend and help Pat Surtain out. Make teams pay, if you can, for throwing it away from Pat Surtain. Now, I think Barron projects more as a slot corner, so perhaps taking the place of Jaquan McMillan rather than taking over for Riley Moss. I could see Surtain, Moss, and Barron being the 3 corners, but Barron can play on the outside depending on the matchup. We always talk about Sean Payton wanting to create those matchups on the offensive side. Now the Broncos can do some of it on the defensive side. I think more often than not, Barron will play in the slot, which is ever more an important position on the defensive side of the ball in the NFL, but he can also go outside. I really like this pick by the Denver Broncos. It does create some urgency, though, tonight to go get a difference-making running back. There are 3 of them that immediately can step onto the Denver Broncos and be their best running back without equivocation. Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, and Caleb Johnson. Some would argue for DJ Giddens as well out of Kansas State. But I like the 2 Ohio State guys and Caleb Johnson out of Iowa. Broncos are going to have to move up to get those guys. But if they do, like, here's the thing. You get the flashy pick in Barron, right? The best player available. Then you take some of this draft capital that you have and you move up and you get the need that you had going into the draft. I mean, what else after that do the Broncos need to do? So if they swing a deal here as the Cleveland Browns are on the clock, and it doesn't have to be for this pick, but I'm just saying if they move up and get one of those 3 guys, you still got the running back that you needed. Genty was never in play, nor should the Broncos have paid the price to go up and get him. And yeah, Omarion Hampton, it stings a little bit that he went to a division rival, but Henderson's right there with Hampton, in my opinion. And Judkins and Caleb Johnson aren't that far off. I think that is priority 1 for the Denver Broncos, and we'll see if they can swing a deal to go up and get one of these guys as the second round begins. Story number 2, we'll move to the NBA and then back to the NFL. The Denver Nuggets got absolutely smacked around by the LA Clippers last night in a game that reminded me very much of game 2 last year with the Minnesota Timberwolves. The final score, by the way, 117-83, if you did not see. What happened in game 2 of the Minnesota series and also happened last night to the Nuggets. Previously in the series, you watched and you said, there's some issues here. The Nuggets could not deal with, and physicality has been the common thread, right? Physicality bothers the Denver Nuggets greatly. But there were warning signs, there were cracks forming, but they were able to get by for whatever reason. And then there was this game where the levees just broke and the Denver Nuggets get destroyed. And that was the case in game 2 against Minnesota last year, and game 3 last night against the Clippers. The bigger thing than the physicality, because the physicality is certainly a part of this. Clippers in the first half hit 12 of 22 3-pointers. Nuggets go 5 of 18. You could argue defense, offense, the chicken or the egg, right? How long have we been arguing that? All throughout history? Yes, it is very chicken or the egg. But the fact of the matter is they can't do either. They can't shoot threes and they can't defend. I will say that the defensive part of this is their bigger issue. But it is both, right? You could put one above the other, but it's both. It's definitely both. In a league that has become more dependent on three-point shooting, the Nuggets can't shoot threes and they can't stop other teams from shooting threes. And this is why it's so important. And I'm not throwing too much at David Adelman for last night. I don't think last night was his fault. This is why you need to get a new direction into this team. A general manager, a head coach that are aligned. They evaluate this roster, and they will see the same thing you and I see, that they can't shoot threes and they can't defend threes, and they're going to go out and make moves no matter who that costs them, save for Nikola Jokic, to be able to compete at a higher level in today's NBA. The thing about the Nuggets is they built their team right before there was a paradigm shift. And they are very slow to react. And now with the new regime coming in, when this series is over, they will be able to do a better job of keeping up with the Joneses without being hampered by, oh, we really love this guy because a few years ago he was able to bring us a title. The only thing that the new general manager and new head coach of the Denver Nuggets need to be loyal to is winning. And it was an exaggerated example last night, but it was a necessary one for Josh Kroenke to see his team is broken. Blame Booth, blame Malone, blame the CBA, do whatever you want. But the fact of the matter is, watching last night, there is no way that you can misconstrue that and go, Nuggets are close. They're not close to defending and competing in today's NBA. Before we get to story number 3, we have a pick on the board with round 2, pick number 33 for the Cleveland Browns. It is Carson Schwessinger, the linebacker from UCLA. So a little bit of surprise here after they got Mason Graham last night. They get defense again, and I do have more on Carson Schwessinger. Carson Schwessinger, linebacker out of UCLA. If you're a Buffs fan, you saw him a little bit. Interesting pick there for the Cleveland Browns. Thought they would go offense. At the very least, go on the offensive side of the ball. But they doubled down on defense. Pick number 34 with the Houston Texans is in. Before I tell you who they pick, because I don't know yet, let's go to story number 3, which has to do with what we just talked about with the Cleveland Browns staying on the defensive side and not going offense. The fall last night of Shedeur. And I think this can't be just about him as a quarterback prospect. I think he's a better quarterback prospect than Jackson Dart. I do. I don't think this is about Shedeur, the person. I think there has been some maligning of his character that I don't think is fair. I heard a lot from Shedeur. I've watched a lot of Shedeur. I think he is all the right stuff. A little braggadocious at times, sure. But there are plenty of athletes who bring that to the table, and teams are just fine with having him on their roster. What I think this is about is Deion. I think the shadow of Deion hanging over the organization is a distraction that head coaches don't want or need. Deion said that he would get his son to a good place. He said he would essentially pull an Archie Manning. You don't think teams heard that? And the minute the team Shedeur lands with struggles, all that's going to be talked about is how Deion's going to take over for the head coach. Whether that's true or not, it's going to be there. I think if last night is an indictment of anyone in the Sanders household, or is a message to anyone in the Sanders household, I think it's Deion, not Shedeur. This is similar to LeVar Ball, right? LeVar Ball was viewed as a liability for LaMelo and Lonzo. He was boisterous. He was omnipresent. And that's a different dynamic than you get with most every other athlete. We never talk about who his parents are. I think Deion is impacting where Shedeur goes more than Shedeur. Take your thoughts on that. 719-247-1313. There's just been another pick at 34 for the Houston Texans. And I think I had a nifty little vignette for him. Did I? Perhaps not, but I can tell you who the Houston Texans just took. It's another weapon for CJ Stroud as they get a wide receiver out of Iowa State, Jaden Higgins. And Higgins is a burner and very productive. You know, the injuries that Houston has sustained in the wide receiver core over the last year or so probably need to get another weapon there for CJ Stroud. So that's the route that they go. I swore I had a scouting report on him. Perhaps I didn't. But that's where the Houston Texans go with the second pick. Now, interesting. Seattle is now sitting at 35, and their pick is in. Could this be a quarterback? They signed Sam Darnold, but is he a permanent solution or just the solution for this year? We'll take a break, and on the other side, I'll tell you who Seattle drafted. No running backs yet, which I think if you're a Broncos fan is the best case scenario. More Drive Time Sports after this. Back here on Drive Time Sports, Richard Sherman announcing the pick for the Seattle Seahawks. They traded up with the Titans at pick 35. We'll see who Seattle was so eager to take here. Man, these former pros like to milk this for everything it's worth. Getting up there and speaking. It will be a safety, Nick Emenwari from South Carolina. I do have a little bit more on Emenwari. I know I saw it. Man, I cannot. There he is. Let's find out more about the newest Seattle Seahawk. So that is the report on Nick Emenwari, the safety out of South Carolina, of course, going to Seattle, announced by a member of the Legion of Boom, Mike McDonald, the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks, of course, coming over from Baltimore. He's had some good safeties that he's been able to employ from his time in Baltimore. So, like this pick, Seattle, very, I guess, responsible would be the word I would use, because they could have gone flashier. They could have gotten another weapon. They decide to go offensive line in the first round, which was a need for them. They get a safety here in round 2, and now the Cleveland Browns are again on the clock. They made the trade to essentially give up the chance to draft Travis Hunter. They've gotten Mason Graham when they traded back. They got Schlesinger, the linebacker from UCLA, and now this isn't going to be good news to Broncos fans, but not the worst news. Quinshon Judkins, the running back out of Ohio State, is the selection at pick 36. So one of the, in my mind, 3 big targets at the running back position for the Broncos on day 2 is gone. Let's find out more about Quinshon Judkins. And there, right at the very end, is probably part of the reason why Judkins might be lower on the Broncos board than a Travion Henderson, the pass blocking aspect. That's one of the traits that the Broncos are looking for in a running back. And look, and George Payton had some interesting thoughts on that. He said it was very difficult to project because not a lot of running backs are asked to do pass pro. But if one of Judkins' minuses is pass pro, then I would think that's maybe why the Broncos, and I don't know where they have him on their board, but could be maybe why Judkins not the ideal candidate for the Broncos. And I say that to say that the ideal scenario is still there, even though it's an impact running back that you heard in that scouting report has the potential to be an impact on all 3 downs. Travion Henderson brings a little bit more to the different skill sets. I'm not going to say he brings more to the table or less to the table than Quinshon Judkins. He brings to the table what I think Sean Payton wants in his running backs. So the fact that Judkins goes off the board to Cleveland is not the worst case scenario for the Denver Broncos. Now we've had another trade. The Miami Dolphins have now moved up to pick 37. So now we're getting a lot of trades. Got a lot of trades last night and now getting a few already here today. That's Vegas trading down. Interesting. Two potential quarterback needy teams with Cleveland and Vegas. Cleveland goes linebacker with Schlesinger and goes running back with Judkins. Now Vegas is opting to trade back later in the second round. And did they swap? I don't think they swapped. Oh, there we go. They finally flipped it where I was looking. So the Raiders will now pick at 48. We're at 37. So Vegas elects to move back. Two teams that could have potentially drafted Shedeur Sanders. Now, as far as the Browns go, don't forget they got the first round pick next year. I think that is important here. While I would still, bird in the hand, we're two in the bush and all that kind of stuff. If I'm Cleveland, I would have used one of these two picks to take Shedeur. But the way that Andrew Berry was talking last night after making the trade for Travis Hunter, or allowing the Jags to take Travis Hunter, the first round pick they have next year, now they'll have their own and they'll have Jacksonville's. And Jacksonville, not coming off of a great year, some ammunition for Cleveland to potentially get a quarterback that they've already scouted in next year's draft that they very much like. So I wouldn't be shocked if Cleveland passes on quarterback, even though I wouldn't, because of the prospects in the 2025 draft, a much more quarterback-rich draft. But the Raiders trading back is very interesting. Who did the Dolphins move up to take? Well, it is Jonah Savalinia, and I'm sure I'm butchering his name, but you'll hear it pronounced properly right now. So there's the lowdown on Jonah Savaiinaea, the tackle. It's interesting on that vignette. They list him as a tackle. Right at the very end, they brought up that a lot of scouts think that he'd be better placed at the guard position. I'm watching NFL Network, they have him listed as a guard. ESPN's Draft Tracker has him listed as a guard. So this is a guard for Mike McDaniel and the Miami Dolphins. So this is who they wanted to go up and get. Obviously, the Tua jokes write themselves in terms of needing protection, but Miami certainly had needs on the offensive line, and they get it from the interior of the offensive line, help them with the running game a little bit, take a little pressure off of Tua. So that's who they moved up to get. But Vegas, again, opting to trade out of that pick. They will draft a little bit later on tonight. They'll draft in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, about 10 picks, 10, 11 picks. So could they think perhaps with the teams coming up, New England, followed by Chicago, New Orleans, and Chicago again, do they think that the quarterback they like is going to be available past that? we'll find out. Maybe Vegas is really this in on Geno Smith. And they think that if it doesn't work out, then they'll have their pick next year to be able to get a quarterback. But the Raiders trading back. The Broncos side of this is so far so good, right? One running back goes off the board. That was Quinshawn Judkins a couple of picks ago, 36 to the Cleveland Browns. Travion Henderson still available. Mike Vrabel is on the clock with the New England Patriots. I would imagine he'd want more of a power back than Travion Henderson. A Judkins would fit New England, I think, a little bit better than Travion Henderson could. But you know the importance of the run game when it comes to a Mike Vrabel coach team. And then you have Ben Johnson with 2 picks in the next 3 after that. As they end up going Colston Loveland, they still have needs on the offensive line. I'd like to see them kind of finish it out. They've tried to remake their entire offensive line, get one more piece for it, but they have 2 picks. And sandwiched between those 2 Bears picks is New Orleans. So perhaps if you're looking for a place for the Broncos to move up, they could move up to, maybe, they'd really, Bears could very well take a running back. Is George Payton on the phone now trying to move up to the New England's pick? But we'll see. A couple of teams here coming up in the next few picks that running back would not be out of the realm of possibility. And then you have the Jets. If they're looking to move on from Breece Hall, could that be almost a blessing in disguise? If the Jets go running back, then would it make Breece Hall more expendable and the Broncos could swoop in and get him? Dallas is looming. A lot of teams that you could see taking a running back standing between the Broncos and Travion Henderson. And we'll see if how many of them go off the board before the Broncos can make a move if they are looking to move up in the second round. Let's actually step aside here. We're at pick 38, New England. The pick is in. We'll tell you what it is next on Extra Sports 1300. Welcome back, Drive Time Sports. Tom, if you're still listening, Tom and I went back and forth a little bit earlier on about the Broncos and what they need to do in this draft. And interesting that his Patriots end up taking Travion Henderson. So Travion Henderson off the board, the running back out of Ohio State that many thought the Broncos would even go so far as to take at 20 last night, now goes off the board at 38. And now that is both Ohio State running backs that are gone for the Denver Broncos. And now I think you have to look towards Caleb Johnson as being the next best available running back. And then depending on how they feel about DJ Giddens, there's a little bit of a separation until the next group of running backs in this draft. But Travion Henderson going to New England, pass protection, I think Vrabel's going to like that. Little bit, certainly not a Derrick Henry comp at all, but we know Mike Vrabel wants to run the ball. He has a young quarterback, and now he has a running back for Drake May to be able to take some of the pressure off him as he is going into year 2 in the National Football League. So Travion Henderson, certainly one of the Broncos targets as we begin day 2, is gone. And so is Quinshon Judkins. So now if you're the Broncos, Caleb Johnson, I think Luther Burden is obviously he's still available. He would be an option for Denver, certainly, but they do need to address the running back position in a meaningful way, and their opportunities to do so are running out. And this is the flip side of the Barron pick last night. Like the Barron pick, but you do have a need on this team. You were banking on the depth perhaps at the running back class, and that's all well and good. But what if all that depth is gone before you get a chance to pick? Now it puts all the eggs into the Breece Hall basket, right? Broncos making a move for him, and I think that would be good. Look, if the Broncos lose out on the 2 Ohio State guys and Omarion Hampton and Genty, and let's say they lose out on Caleb Johnson as well in the next couple of picks with the Bears on the clock and their pick is in, and they go out and get Breece Hall, I think it's all good. But there aren't a lot of other options available. J.K. Dobbins is the most available or best available free agent. And of course, the Bears are super excited about the person they picked. They'll pick at 39, then it'll be the Saints, and then it will be the Bears again as they went Colston Loveland last night. Wouldn't have been my choice. I would have gone Tyler Warren, but I just think that's how perhaps Ben Johnson wants to employ the tight end. But the Bears pick is in. The former player picking for them doesn't know where to go. By the way, how awesome was that? I know, Bears fans won't like it, but Clay Matthews last night. So I'm listening to the draft. Clay Matthews gets up there, says that he has a message from President Trump. And I went, uh-oh. And then it's that the Bears still suck. I don't think that came from President Trump, just to clarify, but that was epic from Clay Matthews. That was awesome. And he probably heard from Roger Goodell immediately when they stepped off stage. But that was really funny. And now another Broncos target is off the board as the Bears have selected Luther Burden III, the wide receiver out of Missouri. Let's find out more about Luther Burden, the newest weapon for Caleb Williams. And I am too. Love Luther Burden. It's funny, NFL Network put up his NFL comp and it's DJ Moore. Doesn't Chicago already have one of those? Don't they already have a DJ Moore? So the happiest guy in the NFL right now has got to be Caleb, right? You go out and get Ben Johnson to be your new head coach. You completely rebuild the offensive line. Now with the first 2 picks, the Bears have added 2 weapons for Caleb Williams. And now Caleb has DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Luther Burden III, and Colston Loveland. Man. If it may never happen for the Bears. If they can't get this right with Caleb Williams, with all the weapons that he has, a completely rebuilt offensive line, they're never going to be able to draft and develop a quarterback. I love that. Man, that's a great pick by the Chicago Bears. A little bit of an indulgence, certainly, but look, they did a lot of work in the offseason to upgrade their offensive line. And they have Ben Johnson load up on the offensive side of the ball. So now New Orleans is on the clock at pick 40. They obviously one of the teams that passed on Shedeur Sanders. They also passed, for the record, on Jackson Dart. They did not take a quarterback. Their new head coach is Kellen Moore. Does he look at the quarterback room and say, broken Derek Carr, Spencer Rattler, that's enough of what I need? And by the way, in a winnable division. That's a winnable division for New Orleans. And they were so plagued by injuries last year. I think they have a better team than their record would indicate, but they do not have a quarterback. You go out and last night and you get arguably the best, depending on who you ask, the best offensive lineman in the draft in Kelvin Banks. Can't hate on that pick. Smart pick by the New Orleans Saints. Now you have an opportunity to get a quarterback to play behind that line. And Shedeur is ready to go now. The quarterback that's also available is Jalen Milroe. Milroe's a lottery ticket. Has some elite things. His speed, his deep ball are fantastic. He is nowhere close to being ready to be an NFL starting quarterback. Is that a pet project that Kellen Moore wants to undertake in his first head coaching gig? Or does he want the guy that's more ready to go now and could be day one starter for the New Orleans Saints? I know where I would go. We'll see where the Saints decide to go here as their pick is in. And who's this picking for them? Ryan Ramczyk. Like the dude was just on the Saints. Didn't recognize him. So Ryan Ramczyk, who is essentially replaced by Kelvin Banks, and oh my goodness. The Saints have gone quarterback, but they didn't go Shedeur. Tyler Shuck, the quarterback out of Louisville, is going to be coached by Kellen Moore down in New Orleans. This is where the real shock is. Not that teams pass on Shedeur for another position, but when they decide to take Jackson Dart last night, if you're the Giants, and Tyler Shuck out of Louisville here, going to the New Orleans Saints, I'm perplexed. I don't get how Tyler Shuck rose up draft boards the way he did in the last couple of weeks. I really don't. This has to be because the pedigree, coached by Jeff Brom. But and by the way, Tyler Shuck is like 35 years old. We got to make that joke. He's one of those quarterbacks. Man, did not think that if the Saints were going to go QB, they were going to go Tyler Shuck. But that's exactly what they did. So Shador continuing to wait. And I'll stand by what I said. If this is about personality, then it's more about the personality of the dad than the son. I'm sorry. I'll defend Shador. I think that he's a high character guy. Little boisterous at times, certainly, but he's a good quarterback. Really good quarterback. I don't get it. And look, there's one every year, right? One or two every year where you love a guy or you don't like a guy and you just can't quite understand why the player you like is getting passed up and the player that you don't like was taken so high. I guess I just got to say Shador's my guy in this draft. To take Dart, okay, you take Cam Ward over him. You even go opt for other positions if your other team's over Shador. Okay, I can kind of see it. But we have the Giants and the Saints, both who chose to take quarterbacks who are not as good as Shador Sanders. This can't be about Shador, the quarterback, and the skill set. There has to be more to this. Is it what the assistant coach anonymously said? Is that true? It would be a very different Shador behind the scenes than I've experienced. But I think it has something to do with his dad. I really do. Not that Deion Sanders is a bad guy. It was thought that LeVar Ball was this terrible person, and I don't think he was necessarily a bad guy. But when you have a dad that's out in front and that's, dissing other players and going at people and saying you're persecuting my son and all this kind of stuff, it's a dynamic that I think some NFL teams are not interested in. But Tyler Shuck is the third quarterback taken in this draft. Taking Shador out of it, I would take Milroe over Shuck. I don't get it. So this is not even a Shador thing necessarily. But that's where the Saints go. So perhaps day one starter. I mean, he's old enough, that's for sure. Bills, their pick is in. Love their pick last night of Hairston at a corner. We'll see what the Bills do here. Broncos obviously have not made a move. They are still sitting at 51. Just to update you, if you have not seen, Carson Schlesinger, the linebacker out of UCLA, went to Cleveland. Jaden Higgins, wide receiver out of Iowa State, to Houston. Nick Emanwari, safety out of South Carolina, going to Seattle. Cleveland used their second pick of this round to take Quinshon Judkins out of Ohio State, the running back. One Broncos potential target at running back off the board. Then Jonah Savanier, the guard out of Arizona, goes to Miami. They traded up to get him. The big blow to Broncos fans, Travion Henderson goes 38 to the New England Patriots. Luther Burden III goes to Chicago. So yet another weapon for Caleb Williams, much like the DJ Moore that they already have. They get another player with those same skill sets. At 39, and then just at pick 40, Tyler Shuck, the quarterback out of Louisville, going to New Orleans. Next three picks, Buffalo, the Jets, the Niners, and then it will be Cowboys, Indy, Rams, Cardinals, and Raiders, who traded back earlier in this round. Still a long way to go. The one running back that I really like that's still available is Caleb Johnson. Bills have their running back. Jets, if they draft a running back, they could be sending Breece Hall to Denver. So that wouldn't be all bad. 49ers have running backs but obviously they have the main one in Christian McCaffrey. And then I look at the Dallas Cowboys. They need a running back. They went offensive line in round 1. They could use a running back. It is not a running back that is going to the Buffalo Bills. It is a defensive tackle, TJ Sanders, out of South Carolina. And do we have more on TJ Sanders? You bet we do. Meet the newest Buffalo Bill. So more defensive help for the Bills as they get Hairston, the corner, last night, who I really like, and then TJ Sanders out of South Carolina, the defensive tackle. Certainly not a lot of holes on this Buffalo Bills team, so they have a chance to wait a little bit, develop TJ Sanders to hopefully be an impact player on their front seven in years to come. Next up is the New York Jets. The pick is in. And we'll hang on. I only got another minute. Of course, Infinity Sports Network will take over at the top of the hour with the JR Sport Brief. So he'll obviously take you through round 2 and 3 as well. The Broncos are sitting at 51. We're at pick 42. 2 running backs are already off the board. That makes 4 in the draft. Genty going to the Raiders. Hampton staying going to the AFC West with the Chargers. And then you have Judkins going to Cleveland and Travion Henderson going to New England. And even a player that I thought maybe the Broncos would take over a running back, Luther Burden III, off the board. This is going to become a very interesting pick for the Denver Broncos. And if they don't land a running back, then the conversation will be, as much as the Barron pick can help the Denver Broncos, as much as he could be viewed as a steal, this is an argument that you got when you have a need, you got to draft it. Broncos tried to use the depth in this draft at running back. I believe that was the idea, but all that depth might be gone. Doesn't mean they can't get a running back later that can help them, but we're running out of running backs that you immediately say on day one are the best running backs on the Denver Broncos. So we'll see where they go. That'll be it for me. Don't forget, tomorrow, game 4, both the Clippers and the Clippers, Nuggets, and Avs Stars. Our coverage starts at 3 o'clock, and you could just stay locked in the entire time. Appreciate your patronage and your text today. Enjoy your weekend. We'll come back on Monday, talk about the draft, talk about game 4, where are the Avs and the Nuggets at going into their respective game 5s. Enjoy your weekend.